I'm a police officer who works outside of the United States. Arriving at work at 6 a.m., I finished my work at 10 the previous night and ended up running into an assault of an old man on the way home. My commute was about an hour, so instead of getting home at about 11 o'clock, I get home at around 11:45. I have a quick bite with my wife and get to bed around 12:30. I'm up at 4:15 and back to get ready to work. It's about 6:15. I'm on station duties and a man comes in and says that he thinks his wife is missing. He's very sketchy on details and I'm just having to drag information out of him. Essentially, they fight, she storms out, didn't come home the previous night. I check her on the system and she's a respondent of a couple domestic violence orders. I dig a little deeper and I discover they're against her son, not her husband. I am very, very tired and a little bit cranky at this point. I look at the bare information I have and send the chap home to wait for his wife. I'll check the local hospitals, run a check on her on our system, make sure she's never been arrested, and local violence and ambulance records. Nothing. I circulate her details to all units in the city and record the incident. I've done enough to cover my arse at this point, and technically, there isn't anything else for me to do for a while. I go and get a cup of joe, and all I want to do is sleep, but something's not sitting right with me here. I was growing suspicious of her husband. Something was off about him. I went down to my captain and asked him if I could go to the house and have a look around, and maybe talk to the husband again. Skipper isn't delighted about it, because it means we'll have to cover the front desk for a while because we're short-staffed, but he agrees like a trooper and off I jolly went. I arrive at the house and talk to the husband again and ask him if I can have a look around. There might be something that might shed some light on the incident where she might have gone. I have a scout around the house and find several containers of pills with weird names. A Google search later and I discover that the woman appears to be on a cocktail of antidepressants, some mood stabilizers and other stuff. Oh, I discover an insulin kit. I ask her husband about these and he mentions that his wife has had some emotional problems, but he didn't think that was relevant. I sit him down and put it to him that there's a lot of medication here and ask him if his wife has more than one insulin kit. He goes pale at this point. She's left all of her medication at home. I ask him where she keeps her purse. We end up checking beside her bed. Her purse is missing, but I snagged a framed picture for future reference. I am feeling queasy at this point, to say nothing of a banging headache from sleep deprivation. I don't find any suspicious holes in the wardrobe, any secret stashes of cash or drugs. I don't want possession me to do it, but I search the bed. I turn over his pillow and there's a note under it. It's a suicide note, explaining in no uncertain terms that the missing person is intended to end her life and that she can't go on and she's sorry for being such a burden. I radio the station and update them. I then have to walk down into the living room and tell this woman's husband that he's been sleeping on her suicide note overnight and he never noticed. This is one of the hardest things I've ever had to do on the job, besides dealing with dead kids. I found her eventually, though it took me 8 hours. We traced her phone to a nearby town, but that just gave us her general location. I asked the town to her husband, and he said he'd never heard of it. She had no friends or family there, but I got a call 15 minutes later from him saying they had once spent a weekend there shortly after they'd gotten married. I called the hotel they stayed in on that occasion, but they've got no one by her name. I go down in person and show the front desk person a picture, and the lady tells me that she took a short walk by the pier not too long ago. I go out to the pier and find her and we chat for a little bit. Nothing too dramatic. She tells me I look awful and I mention that I haven't slept in a long time. I asked her about her husband and say you should give a second chance on life, as you're not a burden and that he loves you very much. Chokingly, she agrees and we bring her home. A couple of days later I come to the station and there's a box of chocolates on my desk. My captain brings me a card. It reads, "Thank you for not letting me kill myself." When I realized how close I had been to just letting the matter rest because I had ticked all the boxes off the checklist, I went to the toilet at the back of the station and threw up for what seemed like an hour. Every Christmas she sends me a card, and it says, "Thank you for not letting me kill myself." I've shared this story before. Searching that house was definitely one of the scariest things I've ever had to do. I've been a cop for a while now, and this is one of those calls that still haunts me. I had a call for a domestic assault that has just occurred, and I learned that the victim is at the neighbor's house. I go there and find that the female's victim's throat has been cut from ear to ear. The neighbor is holding a towel up to her slit throat, and the victim is struggling to breathe. The paramedics are on the way, and I take over holding the towel from the neighbor. I'm trying to apply enough pressure to reduce the bleeding, but not so much pressure that I'm strangling her. It was a delicate balance. Here's a quick law lesson. You know that there are laws against hearsay, right? Basically, I can't testify in court about the events that someone else told me that I didn't witness. The person who witnessed it would have to testify to it. One of the exceptions is what's known as the dying declaration. If someone is on their deathbed and believes they're about to die, their statements are exempt from the hearsay rules. I have some serious doubt that this woman is going to live. I want to ask her who slit her throat. In order for it to qualify as a dying declaration, I need to be able to testify that she believed that she was about to die. So, I asked her 2 questions. The first was, "Who cut your throat?" which she answered. The second was, "You realize that you may be about to die?" She answered yes. Our eyes were locked, and I still remember seeing the emptiness in her eyes. We go in with guns drawn, show up, and metallic smell of blood was overpowering for the suspect. We made our way upstairs. The door was ajar, smeared bloody handprints all over the walls, and found the child upstairs. Luckily, he was unharmed, but our suspect was long gone. Thanks to the excellent performance of the medical staff, the victim survived. I met with her a couple of weeks later, and I was very apprehensive to speak with her again. I had basically looked at her and told her she was going to die. When she had opened the door, I could tell she didn't recognize me. She had very little memory of what happened that night after she was assaulted. I told her who I was, and she hugged me, crying, and thanked me for saving her life. The suspect ended up pleading guilty, so I never had to testify as to what I had seen from the victim that night. It still haunts me to this day. Generally speaking, calls involving emotionally disturbed people entail somewhat higher risk than other situations. Domestic violence calls are also some of the most dangerous calls to go on, due to part to emotionally charged circumstances. I went to a call once that combined these 2 factors. It was a little dicey, but not really that scary. I apologize in advance for the fact that this comment doesn't really answer the question, but I think that the folks will enjoy this story nonetheless. It is true that oftentimes police officers will see unsightly side of things. Folks tend to call 911 when their world is falling apart, and sometimes it's not pretty. I felt bad for this poor old lady. Her husband, whom she loved dearly, was bedridden. His list of ailments were lengthy. Having trouble caring for him by herself, she would hire caretakers to take care of his needs. They often only lasted a few months, because of this old lady's adult daughter who lived in the house. The daughter, who was in her 40s at the time of this particular call, had a history of mental illness and would sometimes refuse to take her medication. This would result in violent mood swings, and she would often take her anger out on the elderly woman and the caretaker. In an unrelated matter, she was quite corpulent, probably weighing in over 300 pounds. A 911 call comes in. It was a caretaker who had called, stating that the daughter had struck her mother during a heated verbal argument. My partner and I arrived to the scene. We walked into a house cluttered with stacks of old newspapers and other garbage and recycling. It's unclear who the hoarder was, but it was difficult to move around the interior. The daughter is in her room, which is only half a flight upstairs. She is screaming at the top of her lungs for us to go away. She is hollering racial epithets to the caretaker who started it all. The mother was unraveled. The years of stress and her husband's poor health and her daughter's issues had taken a toll on her. She had denied that anything had happened. The fresh bruise on her face below her eye told a different story. It became clear that we were going to arrest the daughter for assault. This was in the late spring. We were still wearing long sleeves, I remember it well. We walked upstairs into the daughter's room, which was more cluttered than the rest of the house. It smelled of garbage and feces. The heat was turned all the way up. She always thought that she was sick when she actually wasn't. She laid in the bed, still screaming wildly at us. She wore only a button-down t-shirt. It was entirely too small for her. She glistened with greasy sweat. We tried to talk to her and calm her down, but it was to no avail. She shrilled so loud that my ears began to ring. As she wailed, I gave my partner a nod and counted to 3. The fight was on. She flailed and scratched and hollered. We tripped over the clutter and she slipped out of her grasp. Now the mother was getting involved, screaming at us not to arrest her daughter. She eventually used her dead weight to her advantage by just laying there as we attempted to handcuff her. We needed 2 pairs, but eventually we got her into the restraints. We had called for an ambulance for commitment to the hospital for a psych eval. It took 6 of us to carry her out of the house. Once outside, steam rose from our bodies in the cool weather. Because I was the most junior officer, I was designated to ride in the ambulance with her during the transport. Needless to say, I had a very, very strong drink when I got home from work that night.